Today is May the 24th, 2021. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University and with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program here in the library. And this interview is being recorded via Zoom and will be part of our We Will Remember Promise Oral History Collection. And with me is Dr. Lee Bird, who came to OSU in 2000.
Correct.
As Vice President of Student Affairs and retired in 2019. So thank you for meeting with us today.
My pleasure.
For today's interview, we're going to focus on three historic events impacting OSU and the Cowboy family during Dr. Bird's tenure here, the 2001 and the 2011 plane crashes, and then the 2015 homecoming parade crash. January the 27th, 2001, a plane crash carrying 10 men associated with the men's basketball program here at OSU, and the community made a promise, and the university made a promise to the families that those lost would never be forgotten. And then 10 years later, November the 17th, 2011, a plane crash carrying four people associated with the women's basketball program here at OSU. And then in October 24th of 2015, a person drove into a crowd watching the OSU homecoming parade, killing four people and injuring around 50 more. I think that's numbers right.
58.
58. Okay.
17, I think it was 17 had very serious injuries, and the rest had moderate to mild injuries, but it was a lot of people.
A lot of people. Well, before we get to the promise and then moving that forward, let's have you tell us a little bit about yourself. Start wherever you want.
Oh, hard. I am retired now. I worked in higher education for 42 years. And I told at my retirement party, I feel like it was served in dog years. So much longer than that. But was at Oklahoma State for 18 and a half years. Retired, and now I'm figuring out how to do retirement. And I do try to stay pretty busy and do community service, which I love, and am involved with the American Red Cross as both a board member and a volunteer. I work with the Oklahoma Medical Reserve Corps. For the most part, I've done some of the COVID vaccine clinics. That's been fun across the state and here in Stillwater. Great way to see old friends at the vaccine clinic. I'm working with the Stillwater Medical Center Foundation, and I also volunteer in the emergency room a couple of nights a week. So with that and pickleball, I stay pretty busy.
You do. It sounds like you stay too busy.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
Well, let's back up just a little bit and have you tell what your first impressions were of campus when you came back in 2000.
Just awesome. It's kind of funny. I had to delay my trip. I had reached over to empty my garbage before, I cleaned my house in Minnesota before I got on the plane on Monday morning to go for the interview. Reached over and was emptying a garbage can and blew out a disc, which I've never had back problems before. And everybody was so kind. They said, okay, we'll just postpone it for a little bit. And I begged. I had to go to the emergency room and I begged. I said, please, let me get on that plane. This is a great opportunity. And they said, you are not qualified with the medication you're going to be on to use a remote from your couch. So you just need to give that up. And it's going to be, and I don't know if it was a week or 2 weeks later, felt, much better after a few days and came to visit. I did not have a window in the room of the hotel at the campus hotel. It was before the renovation, and they accidentally put me in a room without a window. They just had plastic up, and high winds tore through the plastic, and it was quite an evening. It was quite an evening. But all said and done, interviewed for 2 days, met President Halligan and the crew that was in place then. And I thought, if these people offer me, I'm coming. The campus was beautiful. The students were bright and engaging. I thought Stillwater was a bit small. I'm a big city kid. But I learned to appreciate, and I think a lot of that is just the people of Stillwater. It is a great place to live. And I think I made a great decision and incredibly happy for 18 and a half years. Lots of tragedies for sure, but just a great opportunity. I had a great staff. So I was really blessed to be able to come here and finish up my career here.
Well, for those who might not know, what's the role of a VP of Student Affairs, just generally?
Oh, you had to ask. I usually have an org chart when I try to answer that question. It is in charge of most of the non-academic areas, not parking and not bursar. I always make that clear. But the student union, campus life, housing, healthcare, career services, counseling, student conduct. I know I'm forgetting at least one or two. So, and student, it used to be when I first came, we also had the Diverse Students Association, and that moved later under Jason Kirksey when he arrived. So it was 8 different large programs on the student union. So very large programs, all having a director for each of those units, and except for campus conduct and campus life was under the student union. So it's mostly the non-academic areas. The services for students is kind of the focus of that.
Okay. That's in a nutshell, right?
That's in a nutshell, yes.
Okay, well then 6 months later, so you would have come here in the summer? You would have started like in the July or August?
Yes, June. I think it was late June, early July.
And it was probably getting close to the 100-degree days at that point.
Lovely.
And you came anyway.
And I came anyway. Well, I grew up in Phoenix, so this was, the weather wasn't half bad to me. So
that's true.
Yeah.
Okay, well then let's move into January 27th, 2001. Take us through that day for you.
That day, I don't remember what I was doing that day. My memories actually start in that evening. And I was fairly new here and was still meeting neighbors and making friends and getting to know folks in my neighborhood, and was over at a neighbor's house, Sandy Barth, who worked in HR for the university, was down at her house teaching her a card game that my father played all the time. And so I was teaching her how to play 65. And we were playing that game when I got a call from Susie Burks, who said, I've just talked to a highway patrolman who lives in my neighborhood, and they think one of the planes may have crashed coming back from Colorado. And so that was the first notification of that. And she said, turn it on channel 5 or 9 and kind of look for a breaking news that might come out about that. And sure enough, it was verified through that. And she picked me up, and we went to campus that night and got home at about 4:30 in the morning.
And once you got to campus, what were some of the things you were doing?
Interestingly, we decided to go. Cordell Hall was still there, and that's where the basketball office had located while they were renovating Gallagher-Iba. So we went to Cordell Hall, and we could already see when we were getting there that there were some media trucks. And again, as soon as it was breaking news, there was a lot of media there. So our first task was to get in the building and get the building secure. We had police officers out front that were trying to give some privacy to the folks that were in that building. We went up to the basketball office. Coach Sutton, Dr. Halligan, Dr. Birdwell, and Terry Don Phillips were in the room with Coach Sutton, who was trying to notify parents or people, wives, spouses, friends. It was trying to notify the family members of the deceased before it came out on the news. So we were probably there, as they were doing these calls, because they didn't want people to hear it on the news and not have it come from the university.
Sure.
And that was heartbreaking. A lot of the basketball players that had arrived home were there, and a few friends and other coaching staff and support staff and folks were just kind of milling around, some very quiet, some tearful. just people expressing their sense of loss about what had occurred, and a lot of questions, which of course nobody could answer. How did it happen? They were just behind us, what went on, and answers that we did not have. And so we stayed in the basketball office until the president. This is probably at least probably an hour and a half or two, and just sitting and visiting with folks and talking and helping out. And then the president of that group went to the airport to do a press conference talking about the plane that did not arrive and what the report was at that time. So then we went over to, when we finished up there, we went over to the residence halls. Interestingly, we never had a call of their counselors. They were calling us. They were calling Dr. Burks to say, where do you need us? Where do you want us to be? And this was like this first real experience of what now is commonly called the Oklahoma Standard. We didn't have to call people. People were calling us. Where do you need us? What do you want done? How can we help? And that, to me, just spoke volumes about what a good decision I made in coming to Oklahoma State, because that has never faltered. It's just remarkable people, capable of incredible compassion and doing remarkable things. So I knew I made a good choice. So we had the counselors that had called in. We put them in the residence halls that had lots of athletes, student athletes, men, women, where the deceased had lived. And we a lot of folks were kind of at the Bennett Hall. Another neat thing, Kent Sampson, who was over Campus Life at the time, came in, just, he says, I'm going over to Bennett. And food service workers showed up. And this is late at night on a Saturday night. The tills didn't open, but people started, cooking comfort food to give to students who were trying to figure out what was going on, who had been killed, or, what had happened. So Bennett was a pretty busy place. I think we went to a couple of different halls that night where, again, a lot of athletes lived, to check on them, see how people were doing. And when you think about it, there was, I think, within a day or two, there were women's sports that were supposed to fly to go to an event. And so people were nervous and a little bit upset about that. And parents were calling. So it's just, it's the chaos of a crisis, and just trying to be there and be a presence and keep the media away from the kids who didn't want to talk to anybody other than us or each other. So it was kind of interesting. And so we did that. At somewhere around midnight, we got a call from President Halligan that the administrative team was going to be meeting at 2 a.m. at Frontier Engineering off campus. They had a fairly large conference room, and this was a little bit of a secret. So we met off campus so that we could get away from the press. And President Halligan and Ann were there. I don't remember everybody that was there, but it was the same group that made the announcement. And then police department was represented. My staff was represented. Susie Burks was there. So there was that was the only person that was there from my team that night. But folks that had a connection, PR folks that had just lost, one of their colleagues. So around the table, it was quite solemn, and the meeting got going. And during that meeting, we planned the initial planning stage of what would occur on Wednesday, which was the date of the memorial. And we made decisions about the place. Gallagher Ibu was under renovation. People had to go in and dust that building, because it was just, if you've ever, done that kind of work, there's just dust everywhere in your house when you do walls and put up stuff. It was just filthy. So teams of folks went in to help us clean. So the decision was made about the location, the time. One of my jobs was to figure out how many chairs we needed on the floor. We decided to put the team members on the floor of Gallagher Iba, and then it was open to anyone on top. But everything had to be cleaned. They put in decisions. I was just talking about the decisions. There were 4 really hard and fast decisions, and I wrote some notes down last night because I didn't think I'd remember them. The decision was one of the best and first decisions, and I think this was, Dr. Halligan and Dr. Bosserman. They made the decision to have a lead team go to Colorado. First flight in the morning. They literally made the first flight out to Colorado to be on site at the crash site when NTSB was there. And so the lead team was athletic employee who was also an attorney by training. I don't know if that was significant in the decision making. Dr. Bosserman, who in Vietnam had been in 2 plane crashes personally, and Leon Jones, who is now our chief of police at OSU. Okay. So that was the lead team that went out. And their job was to be liaison between the university and families and NTSB to recover personal items, to answer any questions that they possibly could. The second decision was that nobody spoke about the cause of the crash because we just didn't know. As you remember, it took over a year or more for the NTSB to release their report. And they made it abundantly clear that publicly or privately, we were not to guess, not to answer questions about the plane crash, because we simply didn't know. And we aren't going to make guesses. We aren't going to, hypothesize. We just need to shut up and not say anything about the crash itself, because we didn't know. And that's the first thing, why it's kind of how do you think it happened, or what do you think happened? Again, not our business. That's NTSB has to make that decision, and it's not for us to do that. So I think a very good decision. The third was to identify folks for each family. So for each family that was involved in this, the Tegans, everybody, they had an HR representative, they had an athletic representative, and they had a counseling representative that were available 24 hours a day. Well, we never set a time limit on that. And there were many calls that went on at first and then less over time. But there were 3 people that were there to support the family with whatever they needed immediately. And it was 24/7. So whatever they needed, we tried to figure it out and help them get it. So the memorial planning, the do not talk, the lead team. So all those decisions were made. We talked a little bit about music. We talked about, who's invited. There was never a dollar amount, what are we going to spend on airline tickets? When you were planning an airline, you do that a month in advance or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, not 3 days later. Mm-hmm. There was no discussion of money. How do we house them? Where are we going to feed them? Do we have enough space at the hotel? Do we have drivers that can take them from there to the Gallagher Iba? Music, who's going to perform? Who's going to be there? Who are the speakers? Who are the dignitaries? What do we need in terms of their security? It was a mammoth undertaking that was occurring between 2 and 4 a.m. that morning, Sunday morning. Wow, but most of the planning, I think, was very good. I mean, we didn't decide on the musical pieces. There was an African-American student choir that appeared. If you've never seen the tape, find it at the library and look at it. Pretty remarkable in terms of the time. And Natalie Watkins, who was our our media person, had to find photos of everybody and get them blown up and make sure it was appropriate with the family. So the whole front on the stage that was built on the floor in front of the 1,000 guests that we had chairs for, and then everybody in the crowd, what you saw on the stage, in addition to, flowers and seating for dignitaries and speakers, was the pictures of the 10 men who had been lost. So all of this, everything was done in a very short order. And a lot of little meetings, checking in, who needs what, how are we going to do it? Our office, I think Susie ordered the teddy bears that were given to the families, and for folks to hold. It's good to have something to hold on to. So we had these really cute teddy bears sent in overnight, feeding the families in one of the adjacent gyms to Gallagher Iba, so we could feed the family before we did the memorial service. Families were asked what music they wanted played while they were entering. To seat 1,000 people, it takes a while. And it's interesting because the only song I remember vividly, which still brings me to tears, is Diamond Rio, One More Day.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the last song that was played as people were walking in. And we guessed right on the chairs because I was in the last seat of the last row on the floor. Mm-hmm. And it was tight, let me tell you. So those were the things that we worked on between 2 and 4. And then some of the other details, we need drivers to get them over there and to the Gallagher Iba and feeding them. And so all that, dining services is also mine. So how are we going to feed them? How do we move them? How do we provide, kind of not security per se, but how do we ensure their privacy and do this right? So they were moved over from the hotel. I guess it still was the Atherton, but just not renovated. So they moved them over and put them in and had lunch, and then moved everybody to the floor. And there was a counselor assigned to each family member. Okay. So the counselor sat with the family members and with the teams. I think Susie sat with the teams, Susie Burks. So there was just, that kind of planning that went on that was quite remarkable, and lots of details between Sunday morning and Wednesday to get that done. And at another decision or thing that they asked for is Susie and I went out and met with every family member in Stillwater of the deceased, starting at 10 a.m. on Sunday. So got home at 4 and started at 10 and went to visit every family in their homes for the balance of the day. That was our day, the next day.
And there was no game plan for this. You had to do it on the fly almost.
But there's a lot of things. I mean, this is the beauty and the fun of student affairs. Mm-hmm. I just tell you, 42 years of this, horrible things are going to happen. Building fires, bomb threats, whatever it is, there's things that are going to happen. And I think student affairs has always been in a good position to try to figure out what needs to be done and do it. And so did everybody else on that team. And I still remember Ann Halligan putting kind of her hand on Jim's and saying, it's kind of time to go to bed, time to go home. So at about 4 o'clock, we got out, and then Susie met me at 10 a.m. and we were on the road for the rest of the day. So one of the reason that I named that chapter Collateral Beauty was there was 2 quotes that I have in there. One by Famous Amos that said, never stop and take pictures in hell. You don't do it. And then another was to just try to find I am more moved by the kindness and beauty surrounding horrible things than I am moved by the horrible things. Good example. Susie and I had been out all day. It was January. It was dark early. We were at our last home. That was, I won't use the family because I don't know that it matters, but this the last home that I think it was our last home. Family with a young child. Father was now deceased and didn't know how to tell the child. And so Susie reached out to Dr. Linda Burks, who was a child psychologist. And Linda was at the house within 20 minutes and ready to work with the family to talk the age appropriate way to talk to a child who had lost a parent. And so it wasn't just this, aren't we great? We did. It's always kind of a community approach here. And what do we need to do? And how do we get it done? And people saying, we'll do it. Peg Vitek was coming back. She was our director of campus conduct at the time. And she and her husband were down in Texas. And on the way home, she stopped at every Hobby Lobby and every place she could find to buy orange and black ribbon. You could not find Peg bought everything out. And she worked with the students to start making 15,000 ribbons for the memorial. But had she not thought to do that, it wouldn't have gotten done. You wouldn't have the stuff you need here, and you wouldn't have time. So she just decided that's what needed to happen. The teddy bears, that's what needs to happen. Let's figure out how to get it done. We need cars to get people over there. We need to figure out drivers. So it's everybody doing kind of the right thing. Very few people. There was also, and then Monday came. So, I meant to tell you this. This is one of those moments that just, again, learning about this community, I got a call from Sandy Barth, my neighbor, worked in HR, and she was a trainer, organized training stuff for the university. And she said, whenever you show up, whenever you get done, this was like at 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and we were still going. Whenever you get done, dinner's at my house for Dr. Burks and myself. And it was roast beef, comfort food, roast beef, mashed potatoes, a salad, and a vegetable, roaring fireplace, and no conversation, no TV, no nothing. We just sat there and wolfed down the meal, and your emotions are raging inside, and nobody really talked. You just couldn't. You just needed to, start to slow down, get a meal, and then we parted ways from there and started again at 7:00 the next morning. So it was quite a day. Both that night and the next day were just incredibly busy getting stuff ready.
Sounds like the whole week was probably, wasn't it?
Multiple weeks. Yeah. Monday morning, it was, again, I try to look for the good stuff to remember, not the bad. I did not know my counterpart at OU. I had actually gone to a Big 12 meeting before I was officially on board, because they occur in May. So I had met everybody, but we certainly didn't have the bonds that we had when I left. And when I went in that morning, there was a beautiful bouquet of roses. We're thinking about you. Call if you need anything. Sorry. And that again is really, what is now known as the Oklahoma Standard, is how can we help? What can we do? What do you need? And there weren't a lot of things that we really needed. We were working on it, but how thoughtful to do that. And, they made another good decision in the president's office. And he said, because he was having the same experience, people sent flowers to the president's office, to our office, provost. And he said, anybody that receives flowers will receive a personal note from our office. So make sure you log. We used them at the memorial, put them on tables and other areas and dining, but to keep a track of that. And that could be, he would answer them. We would answer them personally. So all that was done. So it was just Texas A&M called. Bill Kibler was vice president there. They had not yet had their bonfire. So, it was, how can we help? What do you need? Do you need counselors? And we thought, no, we're pretty well. I think we can handle it now, but people calling and asking, what do you need? How can we help? And that was my entire staff, a lot of the student leaders. I remember calling them that night and letting them know what was going on, our president and vice president. And, how can we help? What do you need? And they were, extremely helpful, and they help us get people that would, on that Wednesday, not attend the service, but be in a suit and tie to help park cars. Another thing that needed to be done. And we had no trouble recruiting volunteers. People just stood up and said, I want to help. Give me an assignment. And they did. So it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, the logistics of all of that is just mind-blowing when you stop and think about it.
It was mind-blowing. It was amazing that it got done. It was cold and rainy the night of the crash here and there. It was miserably cold until Wednesday. And when the service ended, this is just one of those things that I remember. The sun broke out and it started to warm up as soon as the memorial ended. So it was just one of those things. We went outside and the sun was shining, and the bitter cold had kind of passed away, and that was it. So yeah, and I remember at the memorial service that someone had a crying baby, but it was a family member who was sitting up front and, had the crying baby. So I asked if I could take the baby so they could kind of sit and relax a little bit. So I took this wee one in my arms and was, stood up and was kind of bouncing around, and I got a message from Bill Kibler at A&M, and he said, boy, I thought that baby was going to get your earring for sure. He's just tugging and playing with it. But, just those weird memories, things that kind of stick with you with all this enormous chaos and anguish going on. All of us knew that we could not do the one thing that we could not return their family member. We just couldn't do that. So when you recognize that, when I recognize that, I know that's what they want. And that's what I cannot deliver, but everything in my power to help ease the pain, figure out how to move forward is what we were there to do.
What I remember from that night is bagpipes. Didn't they have
at the memorial? Mm-hmm. I believe they did.
Yeah, and that just very memorable too.
Yeah, Harry Birdwell did I think a great job speaking. Governor spoke. I think it was Governor Keating, who had talked about the Oklahoma City bombing, and Oklahoma didn't need any more tragedies, and so it was a very moving service. It was very well done, especially with the timeline that we worked to get it put on. So everybody did a great job.
And I remember Andre Williams reading the poem at the. Yes. That was very moving too.
Yes. Yeah, there was not a dry eye in the house, I don't think.
No.
Yeah, it was.
And that's when President Halligan said, "Resolve that we will never forget them."
Yes, we will always remember, and that has been used many times by many people. But that is what he said, and it was. He made one other quote. "We will always remember" was one of the first things he said. And the other quote that he had that I remembered was, "We are trying to encircle you with our love." And I mean, he's a very emotional guy. And I just thought that's what this demonstration was. That's what the memorial was, is we're trying to encircle those 1,000 people on the floor and other students and friends that are grieving. We're trying to encircle you with our love, which is that's a family thing, and that was made real clear to me. So it was really cool. And he promised that the kids of those deceased would have a free education at OSU. And that was kind of a surprise to everybody up there, but I mean, it all worked out, and we've done that. And Harry did the eulogy, a governor spoke. So it was really a very passionate service.
And the families seem to appreciate it.
I think so. Again, knowing that they're just in the throes of hardcore grieving.
Yeah, no.
I've been to many funerals and went to many funerals the rest of that week and the next week. But when you've lost people too, it's a process, and you're just kind of in shock, and then you start taking tiny little movements that say, okay, things are different now. But it was hard, but I do think that, yes, they appreciated the service. And I thought it was very well done considering the timeline.
Well, you mentioned 3 liaisons: the athletic department, the counseling, and then HR.
Yes.
I guess I hadn't really thought about the HR part. What would be something that they would be doing? Death
benefits.
Of course.
Yeah. So all the things that were paperwork stuff that go along, how do I do this? I mean, these families were young. For the most part, these families were, what do I need to do? How do I make arrangements? They hadn't planned a funeral. How do I do this? What do I need to do? Death certificates. There were 1,000 questions that they had, but some of them were a little bit technical, and HR was in a great place to look at benefits, death benefits, other benefits for families, and help get through that morass of paperwork that had to be done. So I think that was, again, a critical element that really set our response apart and made it better.
Okay. Well, in your role, dealing with students in particular, were there things that you had to do with the student body after
Sure.
that?
Sure. And after all the crises, I think this is a large part of it. What the counseling center created some pamphlets. We mass produced them, but for the family members, for friends, other family, and really for the student body. When a disaster like this happens, something horrible happens, how do you talk about how you feel? You didn't even know these people personally in some cases. Why do you still feel this sense of loss, or things have changed? So I think there was that was very helpful, and that was something that we gave out to faculty and staff and students alike, and really started us on the road to creating grief-focused counseling at the counseling center. Okay. That was kind of what started that off.
I had wondered.
Yeah.
Were you involved any with the travel policy task force that came a little bit after?
I did not serve on the task force, did not want to serve on the task force. Okay. Family, was trying to think who was the family representative, I think was Nate Fleming. And there may have been more, but that was an aside, and that was not my focus at all.
Anything to say about going to the dedication for the memorial in Colorado?
Oh my goodness. The planning on that one, even more critical in many ways, and even a higher degree of difficulty. You aren't on your home base. You can't just pick up the phone and get a car or do something. Everything had to be planned out. Dr. Bosserman was a master. I think this is his military training, finance background, something. He had task lists, pages and pages and pages of tasks that needed to be done. He was in with his team at least a couple of days earlier than I arrived. And that was to walk the path of the crash in that field and pick up debris. Another interesting thing, they finished that task in a very gloomy, cold day. And when they had finished the task, there were 10 rays of light. I've seen the picture. I am not lying. 10 rays of light, individual rays of light on that field.
Wow.
Where the plane crashed. But they were there to make sure, because if you're a family member, and this was amazing planning, and I think very thoughtful planning as well. They finished the memorial, which if you've seen the pictures of it, it's kind of flat granite. They had to buy the property, which that's where it was, but they bought the property so they could have it. And all the arrangements for family and friends to go to Colorado from wherever they were to get to the memorial service had to be arranged. Every one of them had to be picked up. Well, for here, if they weren't in town from Tulsa and Oklahoma City for the original memorial, there we needed to rent cars, get cars, have cars, and pick people up. So when Dr. Bosserman went through like a 7 a.m. briefing meeting, he would go down the list and somebody would say, it's mine, I'll take it. And if you took it, you were responsible for it, start to finish, and then reporting that you'd done it. Pages of stuff. I was on a 3-person counseling team. Susie Burke, Cindy Washington, and I arrived certainly after Dr. Bosserman's team, but we arrived the day before the memorial and went to the briefing meeting and went out to met with the EMS personnel at the Strasburg EMS, fire and ambulance workers and folks at sheriff others that responded. So we met with them, kind of got input from them about what that night was like, their response, and then went out to the crash site. And our job on that day was to make any family that showed up, because this was the offer. If you want to come out and see the memorial for the first time before the actual memorial service, come on out. So Susie, Cindy, and I spent the day at the memorial site. When we meet a family, we would take them out to the crash site, which was about a quarter to a half mile away from where the memorial rests. And then they did all the planning. And that day was hot, high altitude hot. We were sunburned beyond recognition, having spent the whole day in, short sleeves and out there walking, talking with family, getting to know them a little bit. So that was just blistering hot. So the decision was made that we needed to get a big cow tub out there and put ice and water in it. We had a dinner that night, so we took care of those arrangements. We had a dinner that night. They had the sound system, everything for the actual memorial service set up. All of us got to pick one song that would be played at the memorial. I have a cat friend coming up on my left, sorry. To pick a song. And it was really neat to hear the different pieces. I picked a version of Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and that's the one I remember, but there was beautiful music picked. One about Remember Me was another of the songs. Beautiful. I've saved it and taped it many times. In the Skies of Colorado is what one of the references is. It was just beautiful. So all the arrangements were made. We went back to the hotel. We had dinner. We met with the families. We talked about how we were getting out to the memorial site the next morning and when to be there, what to do. We were on, I think, 3 buses to go out there, city buses. And we had an police escort. So they would block traffic getting on the freeway so that the buses could just really move out. And it was strikes me that it was probably about 20 minutes or 30 minutes in the bus when we got there. And since it was so cold that next morning, nobody needed cold water, but we needed blankets and jackets, because it was just terribly cold when the day started, and windy and a little bit wet. And the police officers that had probably done the escort and other sheriff departments called spouses and said, bring blankets to the memorial service, to the memorial. Mm-hmm. And so all those families that were sitting freezing to death, and it wasn't a huge crowd, but all the folks that were, we drove on the buses with them. We didn't sit we were kind of in a circle around the outside. So they brought in blankets and large towels and stuff to put over the laps of the people that were sitting in the cold, kind of shivering. When that service ended, and it was, again, very well done. Dr. Halligan was the primary speaker, read the names, did information. And then the family members only were allowed, and us, were allowed to go out to the crash site. And NTSB folks were there, counselors were there, the lead team, Bosserman, talking about whatever they needed. There were the right people out in the audience, EMS workers that did, that were the first on the scene. All those people were out there so they could talk to the person who first responded, talk to NTSB. And then one of those, again, nice memories in my head. 2 things. This is, again, the Bosserman planning model. They put in redundant sound systems in this kind of trailer that was hauled out there to hold the music and the microphones and all that. They had redundant sound systems, and the reason for the music was if the media trucks had on those amplifiers, that they can hear noises, half mile. Well, the music there was no way you could hear anything on the field. And they did that to provide not only beautiful musical background, but to prevent people from kind of spying on the families and the questions that were being asked and answered in the field. So it was brilliant. And so we did that. They had about an hour after the memorial service to do that. We got back on the buses. When we were getting off the buses originally, the law enforcement and EMS personnel were on either side. Again, to give a little bit of privacy to the families, but they just lined up and the families walked through them right into the seating area so there wouldn't be anybody bugging them. But again, the thoughtfulness of that crew, amazing. Just being there and getting the blankets and everything else people needed, Johnny on the spot. They even had a helicopter, which you could not see, but it was behind a hill with a medical crew on it in case anybody had, a cardiac incident or needed a helicopter. So they did remarkable planning for this event, just like they had done for the memorial service. When we finished, got back on the bus, we went to an elementary school, Strasburg Elementary, and they hosted us for a lunch. So the families, the NTSB, the EMS, the sheriff, everybody who had been on site, plus all of the families and us from the university, we all went in and had the lunch ladies service lunch. And it was, little chairs, short tables, and, went with our little trays and got our food. And they had taken the time, again, this amazing thing about Oklahomans, they wore like a tuxedo pants, the nice blouses and a orange bow tie. And everybody was dressed in a similar fashion that was serving the food. They had spent some time. How do we honor them? What do we do? And they provided a great lunch, and we went to lunch and then drove back to the hotels, and folks started to peel off from that to drive home, to fly home. So that late afternoon was mostly people coming back and forth to the airports. Had a couple of people stay over. But that evening, after everybody, all the needs on the checklist were pretty much taken care of, we went to a place called Lulu's and had dinner. And that was the care teams, David Bosserman's team, police, the counselors, that team that helped the families all went out to dinner and there's people I don't remember or haven't mentioned. They were absolutely delightful. So we went to Lulu's. Lulu, I don't know her personally, had attended OSU and had this bar. And so we went there for dinner. They had steaks, and that was about the first time that there was really any smiles or laughter. We'd done the memorial, that was over. Everything was, turned out well, and just a time to really relax. So it was volleyball. There was out back, horseshoes, bean bags. I don't know. There's a lot of things going on. Dance floor if you wanted to dance. So, and everybody just kind of milled around, and most of us were just, either playing horseshoes in back or just talking to each other about the day and how it went. And then we went back to the hotel, and we were flying out the next morning. So at about midnight, we hear the fire alarms go off, and Dr. Burks called, and she said, "The hotel's on fire. I'm going out this door. See you there, and get the hell up and get out of here." So I said, okay. So all of us who had just, been doing this stuff, ended up outside. And it wasn't a fire, but it was you could see smoke in the hallway, but it was actually kids that had set off fire extinguishers. And the elements got picked up. And so you thought it was a fire, and when you looked outside your room, it looked like a fire. So we had to be cleared out of the building, and it took 3 or 4 hours before we were back in the room. So I spent the night at the hotel that was just right across the parking lot in their lobby. They were nice too, and helped us get. And then we got on a plane and went home. So it was just, but again, a remarkable effort under pretty challenging circumstances to provide an on-site memorial, and very well done, I think. Very well done.
I think that was like in August of 2001. So
August 25th.
August 25th. And then the one in the Gallagher in the arena was what, in January or February of the following?
January, on the anniversary of the plane crash, playing Colorado again. They were here. So this time we got to host all of the Colorado folks that had been so gracious and kind to us, show them around campus. I think we ate at Eskimo Joe's, maybe just because it's kind of a famous place. So, showed them around campus, went to the memorial. The president provided each of the families with the kneeling cowboy. Remember, that's when it was unveiled, is at the memorial, and the marble slate with the image of the players on each tablet, as you go around, and then the kneeling cowboy. And that was beautiful. And so each of the family members that were represented got a kneeling cowboy small statue. So that was very nice. And then somewhere down the road, a month or two, we had a luncheon for the various lead teams that had participated in the events. And it was after the third memorial, second memorial, I guess, is when we had a little luncheon, and Dr. Halligan gave us a kind of a plate looking thing that had an image in marble of the kneeling cowboy and a little stand. And it was very nice and very thoughtful of him to do that.
Did at some point you take time to evaluate what worked and what didn't work?
Again, considering the timeline and the circumstances, and we had Natalie, and I can't remember the gentleman's name. We had two people that were doing university media. They did a phenomenal job. Now we have, a whole crew and, different we didn't have that then. It was just a very intimate team of senior administration and a lot of people that wanted to back everything up and help any way they could. And it was just to me, a quite remarkable effort.
What did you do for self-care during all of that?
Again, student affairs is so up and down, and every day is different. And it's still, the things that get me emotional are not images of the plane crash or I've seen some, and it's not that. It's just the outpouring. What I choose to remember is the outpouring and the graciousness of the people that I worked with to help do the best we could to start the healing process for these families and friends. And it's a long process, but we do a dinner every year, usually around the anniversary. This year we didn't. Because of COVID this last year, but we do, and to watch the children, these little tiny babies are adults. I mean, this is, they're adults and married and kids of their. It's neat to come back and visit with the families and just talk. And again, those bonds of, especially I think with the counseling staff and the families. The counselors still come. If they had a family, they come and spend time with the family. Mm-hmm. So it's that those bonds were created and solidified over time. And I think it's for a horrible situation. It's just kind of neat to see everybody, moving on as they can. Your life is never the same when you lose somebody you care about, but moving forward in their lives and watching the kids grow up has been pretty remarkable.
Finding a new normal.
Yeah, a new normal.
Basically.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see how they protected public space and private space for grieving, public grieving and private grieving. So that's interesting, I think.
But it really, I was kind of amazed and pleased with how many people came to that memorial service. That was a full house. It was the first one.
The first one.
A very full house. And again, that outpouring, the students wanted to come community members wanted to come to show their love and care to the families and to other folks. And so it was, I think, we didn't look back and say, oh, if we had only thought to do this. I think the planning was miraculous considering the timelines. And I didn't look back with anything, and I wished I'd done something different. It was, I think it was as positive as it could possibly be.
More about how did we do all that in such a short amount of time?
It was, yeah. And it does take weeks. And people that were on another just really kind of cool thing, people that weren't on the front lines, like the counseling staff or HR or athletics, sending notes over there, calling, what can we do? What do you need? There were so many cookies delivered to the counseling center and pots of coffee set up, that the student union and campus life made sure that they had coffee, they had, all the things you aren't supposed to do when you're in crisis or in this kind of stress. You don't drink caffeine, you don't smoke, and you don't eat sugar. I mean, those are the standard three if you're experiencing this kind of shell shock and grief. And I would say that all of that was violated within the first 2 weeks of that experience. But, people, the whole staff was, a lot of them were involved personally, parking, driving, helping, coordinating the ribbons, all that. Everybody was helping. But then they'd make sure after that initial ask to check on the people that were still in the heat of battle, so to speak. So it was just amazing to watch.
What had prepared you with the crisis management part? I'm sure your education did, but had you had prior experiences dealing with this type of loss? Not to the degree, but
maybe not to the same degree, but there are student deaths on every campus. Car accidents, grieving parents. This was just a little bit larger. But I've had students fall out of ninth story windows, and it's fires that have claimed lives, and so it comes with the territory. You're living in a community of whether it's University of Arizona or in Pennsylvania or in Minnesota, you're living in a community within a community, and things are going to happen. Students commit suicide, students kill each other. There have been things that have happened, and I do have crisis management, a lot of it in my background, and I'm a FEMA trained emergency manager, management institute, so I've participated in that as well. And I don't think anything really fully prepares you for this, but I've done enough of it over time that I don't think I was completely rolled over by it, but it was a lot of work and a lot of stress, and making sure that my team was cared for, and that students were cared for, and staff was cared for in a way. When the first memorial ended, I think it was the first one, I asked the staff if they wanted to go, the counseling staff specifically, to go through the critical incident stress debriefing. I have taught that. I have done it for other groups. A couple of the counselors had. There are people in the community that do that. And I went to the counseling director in the counseling center, and I said, I'm just going to offer this up if you think we need to do it. And they decided that dinner at my house and a few beers were a much better way of resting than going through that exercise. And it was nice. We had them over to the house, catered by Klein's or something. And then Dr. Halligan called in and put it on speaker so everybody could hear. But again, I think those in student affairs have been through some of those battles before, just not as condensed and not that many people. So after having gone through this experience, were you in demand? Did a lot of other universities want you to come out and share? I did a program for NASPA on a couple of different things on our campus, but and calls. This is so helpful to just be able to talk to another colleague and say, and this was more in the homecoming tragedy, One of my friends is also in higher education and does critical incident stress debriefing for Wisconsin metropolitan areas. And so there's a lot of it. And she teaches it, and she works with EMS and police departments when they've had a really bad incident. She's done it for staffs. I've been through it for a police officer shooting where I was working in a hospital, and he came in. And so I've been through this. We've done it. That was my contact to say, am I forgetting anything? Is there anything that I can't remember? So having somebody, and anytime I heard about anything happening at another campus, and it doesn't matter whether it was in the Big 12 or not, how can we help? And we did help with a few crises, other places, a car crash that killed, 8 members of a team and a coach, and, just everything. We all need to be in higher education. You think it's so huge, but we're really, a lot of us know each other from conferences. And so you just pick up the phone and call. And I think that's one of the lessons learned is, it's, you're in the light now, but this will end and somebody else is going to have their feet on fire and they're going to need your help. So we helped each other.
That's amazing. And then shortly after all of this was the 9/11.
Yes.
So
you cannot, well, for any of us, I had a family member killed on the 99th floor. He was a risk manager with Marsh Incorporated. And I didn't know that until 2 days after, because they were still looking for him. And I didn't know he was there. He was with Phelps Dodge in Phoenix, and took a job as senior vice president at Marsh, and was only in the building to meet his subordinates across the world and to sign a contract, and was killed that morning. So 9/11 hit really hard. We had another student lose a fireman father. And somebody who they thought they lost their parent, but he had a flat tire on the highway and didn't make it into work, and they later connected. So yes, those connections are really hard, and just the sheer number. I mean, we think we're a family. Firefighters, those groups tend to be very close, and so this was hugely shocking. So to go through this again, and if you can put yourself in that 9/11 morning, it was a Tuesday morning. President Halligan is our president. And we've just gone through this stuff, and his son was an airline pilot, and a commercial airline pilot. So he had his unique worry to get his son down, all the flights were grounded. We can look at all the movies and all the stories about that. I think I've watched every one. But that was a tense moment, and how do we need to respond? And we honestly didn't know what else was going to happen. That morning, there were, the Pennsylvania, the Pentagon, and the World Trade Centers, and the fact that they actually fell to the ground made it, all that worse. But we didn't know what else were going to be. Soft targets might be targets. And so there was worry, does it end here? Does it go on? Will kids go home? Will they be so frightened that they'll just want to be with their parents? And we had ridiculous things happen even on our campus. My office in 201 Whitehurst looked over, I could see the library plaza. If I peeked out the window, I could see that. And so we had calls from parents that the Muslims were burning flags, American flags on the at the student union and at the in front of the library, and I look out the window and there's no such thing happening. But again, we go into a planning process. What do we need to do? How do we need to cover things? And counseling, and it can be an incident elsewhere. Virginia Tech killing. We had roommates lined up all the way down the hallway saying, I think my roommate might be a closeted murderer. So we are, you're always in kind of that crisis mode. 9/11, very challenging. On the heels of this, you think, oh, holy buckets, is this going to, man, what else is going to happen? So that was tough getting through that, because there's just so much uncertainty. And at the time, this pre-COVID, that was a large number of American deaths in one incident, 3,000 or so. Now look at COVID, that just doesn't even hold up anymore.
Yes.
But, a lot of the same principles were involved in that, and trying to calm our students and give the tools to our faculty to help with, just stupid questions and stupid things that were going on, and legitimate things. Again, this is Oklahoma. This is Oklahoma State. I called over to our campus ministry group, which is representatives, pastors from most of the churches around Stillwater. And people said, what can we do to help? And I said, one thing you could do for me is start riding the buses. And so I had ministers in their frock riding, and name tabs, riding the buses, which are heavily used by international students that don't have vehicles. And we just had started the bus service. So they rode the buses all that next week, all shifts, so that we would have a minister. So you could talk to somebody, you could see, the behavior was much better. I think we only had one incident that was reported, many more things during Trump eras, but one incident reported where somebody, or two incidents, somebody wouldn't let somebody walk across the street. They were just kind of speeding up, slowing down, speeding up. That was reported by another student that was behind that car, saw it, reported it to the police, and they addressed that. And another one was allegedly somebody being pushed off of a bicycle on campus, an Arab student or a Muslim student. And so that was, those were things that just we were worried about and planning. And again, helping students understand, what was going on. We didn't understand it either. I mean, quite frankly, that day it was very confusing and horrifying, and what's going to happen now. So yes, those two things, again, 6 months apart, were kind of difficult.
And then we'll fast forward and get into a little happier topic for just a few minutes. The run, remember the 10 run began in 2007. Did you have anything?
I had nothing to do with it except a participant. I am not a runner, but I did do the walk. And Carrie, if I could remember his name, I would.
Alexander.
Thank you. Was great. Folks up in research. I mean, several people on campus. I just saw one is an insurance agent. Just saw her this morning. Spacing on the name, but several people helped coordinate those. Susie Burks helped coordinate the run. And I thought it had started sooner, but 2007 sounds right. And what a great event. The money went to help, again, fund counseling services. And it also, and specifically grief counseling, getting counselors training in current grief counseling best practices. And then also went for scholarships. And I think well over $1 million has been raised and given out at this point. So it was a Herculean effort to get that going, but it's been great. We didn't do it last year. It was they did I don't know how they did it, but looking forward to it this year, and it's going to be done in August. So, yeah.
And those donations would come to a department that you supervised, right? Well, you were over.
Well, eventually, I mean, but it goes. Carrie was the one that wrote it. I think it was $10,000. Maybe started at $10,000 or $20,000, but they've kept it at $20,000, which is an enormous help to that unit. So it's been great. Trevor Richardson was there. He was one of the key folks, counselors, working with families and stuff. So it's just, again, a huge efforts, but he became the director of counseling, then went over to athletics and started their psychological services specifically for athletes, the mental health areas. But he was very actively involved in helping get that coordinated and up and running, and did a great job.
Okay. And then we'll move on into 2011, November 17th, when that happened. Take us through that.
It was interesting. My mom was in hospice care, and I was out visiting her, and Susie Burks called, and it was, I don't remember the date as vividly as I remember the other. But she called and she said, "We've had another plane crash." And I said, I said, you're screwing with me. And she said, "No, we've had another plane crash. The it's athletics, and it's both coaches and the pilots, and talking about kind of what they knew about what had occurred, where they went down. And so I got on a plane and flew home, and similar process, I think, of working with the families. We did another memorial service, and our counselors were again involved to a lesser degree, not the same magnitude, but involved in kind of helping out. And by that time, we were a little bit more, I think, more equipped to do stuff. Pipes again, I followed them and led the family, and we did that, and then funerals followed as well. For the pilots, I went to, it was around Thanksgiving, and when the assistant coach was buried in New Mexico. So I went out to New Mexico and represented the university at her service on that Thanksgiving weekend, and met that family, and they have come to campus. And again, another memorial was built out in front of Gallagher, Iowa. And so it was a little bit smaller in terms of just impact, I think, generally. Still horribly sad that we had a plane crash at all. Students were a little bit more involved. They did bought huge wreaths and hung it on 4 wreaths on Kyle clock, that are just beautiful. And they put them up every year in remembrance of, around Thanksgiving, in remembrance of the 4 that were killed in that plane crash. And that's, I think, that again led to, policy changes about commercial flights or, whatever. And again, I was not involved in that aspect of it, just again, trying to help family members, when they both brought them to campus, and the funerals, went to both, for the pilots, and and the campus memorial. So it was, again, a little bit less magnitude, less new, unfortunately, but got through that pretty well. And again, did some of the same things, released information to students and to faculty. And that memorial was not as well attended as the first was, but it was still a good sized crowd. But we got through that, and then, moved on. So very sad.
Did they do the liaisons too? Again, the HR and the counseling.
I actually don't know whether they had the, they probably did a smaller scale, because there's still those same questions for
Right.
the coaching staff, not necessarily the pilots, but I'm sure they had a liaison for the 2 families, but of the coaches, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure of any of those kind of other efforts. So.
Well, during both of those events, people would leave things like at the spirit rider, or would leave
Right.
items around. Did your students, or in your role, did you have anything to deal with collecting those or doing anything with them?
No, I think it was more, I mean, I remember the boards that were there, they were taken down and photographed and put in a book for the families the first time, maybe even this time cataloged in some way by the library or other personnel. We were not directly involved in that. We did help, the wreaths and stuff, that effort from the student government, but I don't remember having to archive or being asked to archive any of that material. But I do know that in Gallagher, Iowa, when they hung up those huge poster boards and had pins for people to write, I know that those were cataloged and captured for the families.
Okay. And then the lapel pins, the ribbon lapel pins.
Yes, those were out. Those were, remember the tin was the ones that were used for the first plane crash, and the ribbon design was used for the second. And there was some crossover between the 2. So
you have one of each? I
have several of each, but I have my original one. Yep. It's in a drawer. I have it.
Okay. Well, then let's move on to 2015. The
Oh, what
most
a
recent,
happy
the most
day.
recent one,
Yeah.
October the 24th,
Yeah.
homecoming.
Yep. Homecoming. Um, we sell the parking lot for United Way to make money that's our donation for United Way. And student affairs takes turns, staff in student affairs. So that homecoming game was ours to sell the parking lot. So we go out hours before, during the parade and the game, and we sell that parking lot for like $20 or 10, I don't remember what it is, $10, $15. And so all of my staff were in the parking lot selling the parking lot for United Way. We collect all that money, we give it to United Way as part of the contribution from the university, which is substantial. So we were selling that parking lot, and I think there were 5 of us there, perhaps, that were selling the lot. My secretarial staff and another assistant, and I guess a couple of the other people kind of showed up to help out. And we parked several hundred cars, and then we're done. When it's full, it's full, and we move on with our day. On that particular day, we were selling the lot, and I got a call from Mitch Kilcrease, who was the assistant VP for student affairs, also director of the student union. And he said, no, he had come over to the lot and took a call from Manny. Manny works in the student union, and he was out there on the parade, and he called Mitch to say something horrible has happened and that people had been run over by a car at the parade. We didn't know numbers. We didn't know numbers of injured. We just, and Manny did think some of them had been killed. So that was kind of all we knew. And we didn't know whether it was a terrorist activity. We didn't know what, your mind goes to what it all could be. And, and why this occurred. Was somebody drunk? That was my first thought. Was it a terrorist activity on a soft target, a parade route? And so we just didn't know. And I got, the ducks going, and I decided the best. I left the parking lot, and Mitch went over to the parade route since he already had staff there to kind of see what he could do. And I made the decision to go to the hospital, which is an environment I'm very comfortable in, and figured that they would be bringing the injured there. And the most seriously injured were picked up by helicopter on the corner. And you've probably seen the photos and everything else. So they, I think there were 8 people taken off site by helicopter and moved to different hospitals. We are very, very blessed that ROTC and the fire department had just gone through on the parade route, and they could get off and help. And when the fire department used they had equipment on the fire truck to help out. ROTC was there. They became kind of the guards for the scene to help out the police. So that was, and they are just behind where she went through, I think. And then the children that were on that hayride kind of looking thing had passed through safely. There's count your blessings that more people weren't hurt, and small children, that were on that ride were not hurt. But a horrible situation. So I went to the hospital. I called Susie Burks again, who is a director of counseling. And I said, we need all hands on deck. And I want you at the hospital. And she's comfortable at the hospital. When we have suicides, drunk overdoses, stuff like that, both of us went to the hospital pretty regularly. So it was not unusual for us to be there. They knew us, we knew them. So, and we had a psychiatrist that was part of the university's counseling staff. She was literally packing up her office to move to a new job when that occurred. That was her last day on payroll. And she left boxing up everything and came over to the hospital to help out. And who were the people there? Trevor Richardson, there for the first one. He was an intern at that time, a counseling intern. Cindy Washington was there for the first, plane crash. This MD psychiatrist was there to help out. and Susie Burks and myself. And we went in, and our game plan was to just, look in the environment. What can we do to help? And we connected. We were credentialed by the hospital. They just went through and got our names and gave us name tags and credentialed us to provide emergency counseling services to anybody coming into the ER. There's stuff that I don't think people know, that there was a group from OU that was coming. They had a day off. Two surgeons that had a day off, and I think it was a chaplain, and they were going to the OSU game just for fun. And they heard about the homecoming tragedy, the car going through, and that multiple people were injured. They went to the hospital instead of the game, and they worked the front of the hospital where cars were coming in, trucks were coming in with injured. So they did the triage at the front of the hospital, and Stillwater Medical Center was doing it. A staff were kind of doing it at the back door when the ambulances were coming in. It was chaos, but very controlled chaos, because just, you don't have that many people in ER normally, and family members and people looking for people. And was my family member here? Where's my kid? Which hospital were they flown to? Horrifying. I mean, it's scary when you don't know exactly what's going on. And I knew lots of people coming in that had injuries, or with parents or people with injuries. Met a lot of people I didn't know, parents of students at OSU that had been hit by flying motorcycle pieces and in the head, and people with broken limbs. And it was a lot of people for a fairly small emergency room. And their staff did exactly what we did. They had not. I'm sure they practiced for a mass casualty situation, and they have their codes, but they opened up, they set a place just for people to wait to get information, which was a room kind of across, a conference room across from the hospital. They brought in water and stuff for the staff in big tubs, because you start to get dehydrated in a nanosecond when you're doing that kind of work and running around so much. And trying to and getting names and getting them registered to be seen. It was a lot visually going on. The little boy who passed away, I was visiting. Susie was kind of working with that set. I was working with the Indian student who had lost his girlfriend, who had been killed. He was also injured. So I was working with him. He felt he was injured, but not seriously. But he needed to call the mother, and she was a UCO student. She wasn't ours. She was a UCO student, but up here a lot. So a lot of people knew her, and the faculty were amazing. The Indian Student Association faculty were amazing, because they were there by the side of that student, a large presence. They were in the room with him while he was calling the family member, explaining what had happened, what was known, trying to get her phone back. It just, the key story, which is in the Stillwater Stillwater Strong book, a family, a Leo, that you remember the Leo, I think Schmidt's family. They were all at the event. He lost his leg. He was airlifted to OU. But his keys to the van so they could get to OU were in Leo's pocket, and they were so bent because of the impact that they couldn't put the key in the ignition. So I was with that family, spent quite a bit of time with them. After I spent time with the Indian student and the guy with a piece of a motorcycle in his head. Another gentleman having heart palpitations from being at the parade and thought he was having a heart attack. And it was just, there's a lot of different needs, a lot of things going on. But that key is the family said, well, we can't drive our car to get to OU to see if our, husband is still alive, because we can't get the key in. It literally looked like this, just bent over. So took the key and I said, give me 10 or 15 minutes. Let me see what I can do. And I found a maintenance guy that did maintenance for the hospital. And I said, is there a way to do this without breaking it? Because they were from out of town. They were from Tulsa and surrounding areas. They didn't have a way to get another vehicle. So I was going to drive them to OU if I needed to. But so that guy got it into a vise and got it bent back, and it stayed so they could drive to OU. But just, visiting with that family, and in everything, you get to one person. What do you need? How can I help? What do we need to do? And then you move to the next person, and how can I help? What do you need? Getting ice bags for folks, helping make sure everybody got registered. So we all kind of took different families or individuals, and one young lady, again, I won't mention names, her mom was absolutely horrified that her child would be disfigured. She was at our hospital and then airlifted to Children's because of potential brain injuries and those brain swelling and other issues. But her face had been a lot of gravel and it just scraped in part of this. I've worked in ERs before, and I've seen a lot of different injuries and accidents. And so I worked with this very panicked mom and tried to get her through until they could get her onto the plane to get her going. And we still write each other. So I do Christmas cards and touch base. And when we go to our little luncheon every year for that, we get to see each other and look at these, this beautiful little girl growing up has a couple of scars, but she did fine. But the mom was sure she was going to lose her or she was going to be disfigured. And kids, thankfully, heal pretty well. So everything turned out well. It's just hundreds and hundreds of little individual photographs in this kind of picture book in my head. And but as soon as the emergency room was kind of cleared out, went over to the game and worked the game, and unusually quiet at the game. Think about the police. I'm sitting up in the security shack for games. And so I'm sitting with law enforcement and fire and everybody who had just responded to this horrible, horrible scene now in one room. And frankly, everybody's pretty exhausted and emotionally raw, and a lot of hugs and a lot of hand holding, and got through the game and moved on there. So it was pretty emotional.
And how did the community respond to that one?
Again, this was really hard. We had staff, faculty, and students who had some PTSD signs and symptoms. I remember, somebody that was supposed to be kind of helping organize one of our many responses. I'm trying to remember if it was Red Cross, but we had a unit come in to offer counseling. There was a lot of people that witnessed this that needed counseling support. Teachers because we had a lot of kids there. So College of Education was working with the teachers locally to see what they could do to help get them through this. And we had some of the grieving materials and all that. A couple of agencies helped, and we put them over in a church. We set up a no appointment kind of counseling service for any of the people that were injured or hurt or there and had witnessed things and just needed to talk to a counselor. And we had community counselors come in. We had offers of sending in an extra 10 counselors from A&M and other schools. So we did that over in the student union. We had, thank God, our therapy dog program was up and running, and we had the therapy dogs there, and munchies, dining services brought in some, munchies, nothing was healthy. It was just, all munchies when people are, yeah. So, we just provided like coffee and people had a chance to talk and to visit with the counselor and then make referrals if people really needed more advanced care. So we did that for a couple of weeks. Career Services gave up all their interview rooms for a week so we could do that.
Mm.
That's where we did that. So again, another huge effort, just trying to do what we could do to get people going.
And a little bit different since it's occurred in our own backyard, so to speak.
It was in our own backyard. Yeah, we did. Had four services, 4 memorial services in 24 hours. One of them was a joint, husband and wife. And I can't tell you that the therapy dogs were great. I mean, they went over to the police station afterwards. They were over in institutional research office where we lost Bonnie, and over in Ag where we lost Mel. So there were, a lot of moving parts to this, but I'm so glad they were there and available. So that was great. But it was again, then you get kind of through it. And then we did Nate's service. We did the services that evening was the services for Bonnie, I think, and maybe the first one's for the international student. And so there was just, again, kind of an emotional roller coaster, and so many people were hurt, and information and getting names and figuring out, have we forgotten anything? Are we caring for the people that we need to care for? And in some cases, we didn't know that people were standing, right there and witnessed a death. So it's kind of came over time where we became aware of other folks and classmates and others that may be affected by it. So that was a lot of unknowns, but I think, again, doing the right things. Loved having the dogs there, love having Anne have so many of the dogs available on campus. All of that helped with the therapy and just identifying people that really needed either immediate counseling care, support care, and those that were going to require more help going forward. So
because it was the Pete's Pet Posses, that's what you were talking about for the dog.
Yeah.
Dogs.
And then we did a service that I'm pretty sure we did. Student government coordinated a service, a candlelight vigil for those that were lost that night. And I remember I went with Leon, and there were a whole bunch of dogs there as well. And how Campus Life with John Mark got that organized as fast as he did was pretty remarkable. I had a couple of speakers, had a little bit of music, beautifully done in the area outside of the student union where they have kind of the amphitheater built in, that whole section. And I thought, well, maybe nobody's going to come. Everybody's so tired. And it's well, I think it was the next night. I think it was Sunday night. It was packed. And again, the outpouring of care to fellow students, to those that were lost. It was amazing, and a beautiful short service for them. And then, and the dogs, people hugging a lot, candlelight vigil, very well done. And then moved on. So it's again, emotional roller coaster, looking for the things you've forgotten, the people that you may not know about. What do you need to do? But it was very well managed, and the students were very active part of that service. So it was well done because it affected our community. This was an attack on our community. And I think that's a little bit different than an accident. This was purposeful. It appeared purposeful activity to hurt our own, and students really reacted quite vociferously about that. So,
and the Oklahoma Standard came through again.
Yeah. The tail end of that, I spent, because you get a little bit worn, doing a lot of crisis management, and this had been so. We're starting with the parade, the accident, the game. I had a call from one of my dear friends that does this for Wisconsin, and is also a dean of students, was also a dean of students. And she just called, and I kept the message on my phone. But she called me and she said, "Are you safe?" And I said, "Yes, I'm at the hospital. We're working this. I'll talk to you later." And she said, "Great." And called her when I got home from the game. We talked a little bit. And as we were looking at these 4 memorial services in roughly 24 hours, and then setting up the counseling and other things we were planning, that was my person to kind of go over and say, "What are we forgetting? Am I forgetting anything? This is what I need to do, or this is what I have planned." And so I was kind of using her as my sounding board. Well, 7 days after the homecoming tragedy, this person that I've depended on, I wrote a book with her. We have done speeches all over the country. We've done academies together. That's another side of my life. The Don Gehring Academy we did together for 20 years. We wrote a book together, all this stuff. Dropped dead. And younger than I am, 5 years younger than I am, dropped dead, had a kind of a migraine, and went to bed and was dead. And so all this is going on, campus wide, I think it was about 7 days later, November 6th. So we're not that far off. Passed away, and I was asked to do the eulogy at her service in Wisconsin, at their campus, and they are grieving. And this was really one of the worst months. Because this was a person I depended on. Well, I have other friends that are very gracious and caring, but writing a eulogy when you're already heartsick with everything else that's going on was very challenging and very difficult. And then going out and meeting with her family and all the stuff that we had just done. So from a person who can do compartmentalization better than most, it was just very personal because of the loss of life there. So it was just a very, very, very difficult few weeks and months, I would say. So, yeah.
It's been a long road, hasn't it?
It's been a long road. Mm-hmm. But, there are so many, again, I tend to look at I choose to remember. I can't forget the bad stuff. I choose to remember the beauty that comes out when communities work together, care for each other, want to help. And that is very much the Oklahoma standard that I came to know. So I just think it's pretty unique. Maybe it's not unique. I didn't see it in Phoenix. I guarantee that. Didn't see it in Tucson. But here I've really seen it in a way that is unique. And we've had this tested too many times. Between tornadoes and accidents and horrible things, we get a lot of practice, I think, in Oklahoma.
No regrets from coming here?
Absolutely not. And in fact, I will tell you that, again, 6 months in, I received a card from the staff. Margaret Voss, director of the student union at St. Cloud State University, sent me a card, and on the front of it, it just said, "Breathe." Mm-hmm. And inside it said, "Now you know why you're there. Now you know why you're supposed to be there." So I thought that was kind of telling and weird, but meant a lot to me. Still have that too. So yeah, now you know why you're there.
Well, I think we were lucky to have you here.
I appreciate that. It was, like I said, a staff and community effort. And it just still is remarkable to me. All of the kind gestures, all the things that were done well to support our campus and larger community during some pretty tough times.
Well, events like this do transform everybody involved, really.
Absolutely.
One way or the other.
Yeah.
So we were lucky to have you here.
Well, I appreciate that. Now I'm back working in the emergency room, and it seems like it's kind of come full circle in some ways. So,
well, you've covered all of my questions.
That's pretty good then.
Has there anything we haven't covered that you want to say? Any additional comments?
No, I'm so thankful that Dr. Halligan hired me. I am so thankful that he was the president through these, and I think President Hargis did a great job too with the homecoming tragedy. But I was so glad I was working, that he had hired me, and it was just a phenomenal relationship with that whole very small. It got much bigger after Dr. Halligan left. But that core administrative team was really pretty amazing. And I'm very blessed and lucky to have worked with them.
Great leadership.
Yep.
Great leadership.
And he too went out well after all the funerals and everything else. He went out and visited all the families in their homes too. And was with Susie Burks and went out to see them in their homes, and very, very moving stories from that as well that are very private. But just, I think he and Dr. Hargis with the homecoming, President Hargis did a great job kind of leading the troops to get through that.
And they both have they do keep their promises, and they have a personal touch that
yes, both of them
speaks volumes.
Yeah. And, and it just, I don't know, it's just, I choose to remember the more positive things. Texas, University of Texas flew their flag at half staff, took a picture of it and sent it to us after the plane crash. And I think they may have done it again for the homecoming tragedy. It's Big 12 is pretty 11, 12. Big 12 is a pretty supportive environment. And the outpouring of love was just not on our campus. It was with that whole community. So again, I'm very blessed to have worked in the Big 12 and work with those colleagues, and especially my staff. They were remarkable. And the new ones, some of them were brand new when they got here, around the time of the second plane crash and homecoming tragedy. There's new staff coming in, and they were on the front lines of all this. So Student Affairs has some pretty remarkable people.
Well, I have two questions left then.
I'm ready.
If you could go back and tell your 20-year-old self something, what would it be? Well, I really don't. Well, my 20-year-old self was just trying to get through school as a first-gen student. I was under my undergraduate, going on for my master's degree, but I think I knew, and I don't know many people that have this experience, because I didn't know exactly how I wanted to use my degree. My decision to go to grad school was based on volunteer work when I was an undergraduate student. And I had 3 other jobs, but I was still doing volunteer work. Before there was 911, we set up in Tucson a bank of phones in the basement of the student union to answer questions. It dealt with everything from injuries to domestic violence to rape, because 911 didn't exist yet. And so this was a referral line. Somebody's hungry, homeless, whatever. And that got me into counseling. So my 20-year-old self, 17, 20, still an undergraduate. So 20-year self was already, I think, preparing for this in some ways. I had been a lifeguard. My family, both of my parents were very involved with Red Cross, teaching first aid, serving their church. So this path of service was, it was kind of expected in some ways. Even though I was the only one to go to college, it was kind of expected. And I think that really set me up very well for what occurred. And if I was telling myself something, it would be, you won't be poor all your life. It's going to work out, because you don't know when you're 20 that, it's going to turn out okay. You're just in debt and working all the time and trying to hang in school.
but I can tell you, as soon as I finished my master's degree and started on my first campus as a counselor, I knew as if that light were shining on me to say, this is where you belong. I don't know many people that get those messages, but I knew I was actually giddy, and I knew I was now in the profession I was supposed to be in. This is what I was supposed to do the rest of my life. And I have. I mean, that's higher ed is 42 years, in. So just getting from the poverty part to the not living in horrible little apartments. And I think it would be trying to reassure that 20-year-old that it's not always going to be this hard. Mm-hmm. And that, advancement may be possible, but you don't see that when you're 20. You just know that you're in the grind. It is. So I think I'd tell myself just to kind of calm down, that everything's going to work out, because I certainly didn't see that until I really started my first job and then went back to school to get my doctorate. They're pretty tough times, but I was working in higher education the whole time I did that too. So,
So just hold on, it'll get better.
Yeah, hold on, it's going to get better and things will work out. So, and I think they did. And I knew I was supposed to be in higher education. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know I was going to be in Oklahoma or Minnesota or Pennsylvania, or I didn't know where. But as soon as I had that first job, I knew it was going to be in education. Mm. So, yeah, pretty lucky.
You're pretty lucky.
Yep.
Well, then my last question is, how do you want people to remember Lee Bird?
Wow. I've actually never been asked that. Do you know something I don't? No.
No. It's just.
I hope as a servant, that's a leader, a good leader in student affairs, not in global affairs, in student affairs. I hope that is the legacy. My legacy are the students that I have worked with, and there are a ton of them, still in touch with many of them, that they left our institution and are doing great things. They're in med school, several of them. They are starting lives, some of them in higher education, and following a path that they learned in our office, or, working with our staff. I think the students are the greatest legacy, and to be remembered. I hope they remember some of the experiences they had while they were on our campus, and the fun, literally fun and humor of our office. There was a lot of it, not necessarily the disaster days, but the rest of the time that we had fun and we worked really hard and made a difference in the lives of the faculty, staff, and students that we worked with. I think that's the highest goal you can have, is make a difference in their lives every day. Every opportunity you have, make a difference.
Well, I think you've reached that, because I've heard some stories, all positive.
Oh, good. I was going to ask that part too. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And I haven't been in jailbirds lately, so I guess everything's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing good. We'll give you 2 thumbs up.
Thank you. You're very kind.
All right. If there's nothing else, thank you so much for sharing this afternoon.
You are so welcome. Thanks. And if you can find the book, it'll help maybe with some details, but I think we covered it pretty well.
Okay. I'll look it up.
Nice. All right.
Enjoy retirement.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.